Lloyd is an ugly, disgusting loser who was nothing more than a failure in the eyes of nobles, who used to mock him for having no baddies. Eventually, they got rid of his ugly ass, which resulted in him getting reincarnated and becoming the most powerful magician, although a rather zesty-looking one. From being a prince and having a demon as a pet to hot maids giving him baths, he now has it all. But before he is reincarnated, Lloyd finds himself in front of nobles who laugh and mock him for being a loser. They ask him to use magic, and after seeing his magic powers, which are not enough to eliminate a fly, they make fun of him even more. They then mention that diligence, in this case, is a broader prerequisite, and no amount of it makes up for the lack of talent and breeding. One of them then attacks Lloyd, roasting him to his demise. During his last few moments, he regrets not learning more magic, and then opens his eyes, seeing a bunch of hotties surrounding him. Lloyd then tries to fire magic that causes an explosion, while the whole city celebrates the birth of Prince Lloyd. A few years have gone by, and Lloyd is hiding from the maids because he was caught smelling their panties and runs into the knights, requesting them not to tell the maids that they saw him. The knight talks about how his young age might put him out of the crown competition, but the other one argues that Lloyd was able to speak really soon and even refused to drink his mother's milk like a true gentleman. Apparently, Lloyd knows that he was reincarnated and remembers the memories from his past life. While he was a normal Salamite in his past life, he is now the 7th son of the royal family. He doesn't care about his status at all and only wants to learn all there is to learn about magic. Just then, a maid named Silpha catches him in the library. The two of them then begin sword training. She tells Lloyd that as a member of the royal family, it is important for him to know swordsmanship. Silpha has been put in charge of his education, which has become the purpose of her miserable life. With that being said, the sword fight continues, and Silpha compliments Lloyd for getting better. However, Lloyd knows that Silpha is holding back, and he is using control-type magic to trace all of her moves, which in other words, means he is hacking.
Hackerman.
But even with this, his midget-sized body always puts Lloyd at a disadvantage. Following that, Lloyd starts using more of his magic abilities to raise his skill levels. The battle between them starts heating up, and Lloyd realizes that he might just win, but before he can strike, Silpha figures that he is using a magical aimbot and knocks him down. However, his use of cheating tricks to reach her skill level makes Silpha proud, and she starts hugging Lloyd, saying that there's no rush and that he can grow at his own pace. Later that day, she takes him to the women's bathing area, allowing him to witness more melons in a day than he had seen in his whole previous life. The other maids tell Lloyd about the forbidden library with a demon. The story is of the time when Saloon was nearly destroyed, but after the sacrifices of countless mages, the demon named Grimoire was sealed inside a Playboy magazine. Apparently, it is sealed away in the castle's forbidden underground library, and Silpha mentions that it's most likely a fairy tale, saying that there is no way Lloyd would be scared of it, only to realize him shaking in fear. One of the maids offers Lloyd to sleep with her, using her thick thighs as pillows if he's afraid, and the other maids start fighting over him as well. During nighttime, Lloyd sneaks out and uses concealment magic to make himself invisible. Elsewhere, the knights guarding the underground discuss the hot babe they saw while Lloyd easily manages to get past them. He eventually opens the library gate and starts looking all over the place. Suddenly, a book starts flying around and praising Lloyd for breaking the seal on the door. It introduces itself as Grimoire and asks Lloyd to unseal him, saying that even if he doesn't, the seal has already degraded from age. Grimoire then offers Lloyd some gold in return for unsealing him, but Lloyd figures that all he did was turn some dust into gold, saving him from getting scammed by a historic demon. He then informs Grimoire that he will replace the seal as it's dangerous to let out a demon that threatens the kingdom. Grimoire tries to reassure Lloyd that he only had beef with the old mages and has nothing against him. Furthermore, he offers to teach Lloyd some ancient magic, which makes him feel overjoyed. This results in Lloyd breaking the seal and releasing the demon. Without wasting any time, Grimoire attacks Lloyd, but he comes out unscratched, asking Grimoire to show him some more tricks. This makes Grimoire furious as he keeps on attacking Lloyd, but none of the attacks puts a dent on his barrier. Lloyd then starts controlling Grimoire's magic and mentioning how beautiful it looks. Having no other choice, Grimoire uses the double incantation technique to attack Lloyd. But as expected, it doesn't do anything. Lloyd thinks about how only demons can do double incantation because they can have two mouths. Eventually, Grimoire gets tired, and Lloyd mentions that his magic is really interesting. Seeing how Lloyd might not be a goofy library-loving geek, Grimoire tries running away but is blocked by a barrier. He mentions that it's not for Grimoire, but to protect the other things from his own magic. Annoyed by Lloyd's yapping, Grimoire tries attacking, but Lloyd stops him right there and uses one of his own fireball attacks on the demon, making a medium rare steak out of him. Following that, Lloyd fixes everything in the library using magic, and Grimoire starts calling Lloyd his master. However, Lloyd is more impressed that demons can't be eliminated from magic. But Grimoire replies that they can still get their ass beaten. He then decides to pledge himself to Lloyd and serve as his familiar. Lloyd agrees and asks Grimoire to transform into something smaller. He then transforms into a cute little version and plans to get close to Lloyd and take over his body. However, Lloyd's mana turns out to be monstrous. Lloyd notices that Grimoire is shaking and reassures Grimoire that he will get to see more impressive things late at night. Lloyd is chilling in the library, reading books, when his brother, Albert, pays him a visit. Following that day, Albert showcases his accuracy with magic, and everyone is impressed, including Lloyd, telling Grimoire that Albert is the second prince to the throne. He also got the authority to access all kinds of facilities and made baddies through the castle. Lloyd realizes that it is rare for him to be allowed to fire magic in the castle. He decides to play the dumbass little brother role, as becoming the next king isn't on his bucket list. He purposefully makes it so his fireballs only graze the target and not hit it directly. One of the geezers starts making fun of Lloyd while he thinks about adding rotations to his fireballs. Albert then decides to take a break and gives his Smurf-looking brother permission to play around for a bit. After they leave, Lloyd freely expresses his excitement about getting the practice range as he wants to practice a lot of stuff, including the art of rizzing up ladies. Grimoire mentions that it's impossible for Lloyd, but he ends up assimilating Grimoire into his own body. Following that, Lloyd asks Grimoire to cast Pelance and Sinnes, and he proudly agrees. But just when the two of them start their incantation, Grimoire shits his pants after seeing Lloyd's complex magic. Lloyd says that it's just a spell stack, which is a way of abbreviating spells that require incantation. This reduces the time required to activate them. Currently, he is trying 100 different incantations. The Virgin Demon freaks out and says that a single stack doesn't have more than 2 or 3 spells. Afterward, both Grimoire and Lloyd realize that they can talk through both the mouth, the hand of Lloyd's body, and maybe the other holes he has. With that being said, the two brain-dead losers get prepared to perform a magic spell, but Grimoire fails to keep up with Lloyd and struggles to deal with the unreal swell of mana. Lloyd eventually fires the attack, causing a huge explosion. Meanwhile, people question Albert the reason he gives so much attention to that snot-nosed brat, and he replies that Lloyd purposefully grazed all the targets, and he's most likely a prodigy who might even become a famous adult actor one day. The knight then notices that it's already nighttime, but little does he know that Lloyd ended up blowing a hole in the sky with his magic. Luckily, it manages to go back to its original state. The next morning, Grimoire informs Lloyd that his stunt was featured on CNN, and Lloyd mentions how he panicked there for a moment. He then notices news about an A-class team clearing a dungeon and decides to explore the dungeon and bring back a bunch of mystically empowered items as well. Grimoire reminds good-for-nothing Prince that his absence will freak out everyone. But to tackle this problem, he takes out an acorn from his ass and uses his magic to turn it into a perfect replica. Apparently, it can mimic normal movements, but the real problem lies with Silpha. She can tell when his little buddy grows, even on the scale of millimeters. He doubts that this China copy can fool her, but nonetheless, he decides to leave it on luck and go out. It turns out that Lloyd has assimilated half of Grimoire's body into the clone. Lloyd asks him to keep pretending to be him and be careful of Silpha. Grimoire is impressed by the clone, as it even has the ability to get bricked. He then figures that it's a perfect chance to open the famous hub website, but Lloyd says that he is glad to have him as his familiar, which makes Grimoire tear up and embarrassed. Even though Lloyd left the castle, he had no idea where to find a dungeon. He then notices a girl running away from a bunch of fat, thirsty orcs. She eventually stops and starts fighting them, assaulting the poor orcs one by one until none of them are left. Lloyd figures that she is using Kai, which foreign countries use to channel energy through their bodies by breathing. Eventually, she notices Lloyd, and he decides to meet her. But talking to the opposite gender is too much for a cherry boy like him. Hearing no response, the girl thinks he is an enemy and starts heading towards them. Luckily, Lloyd manages to disguise himself and introduces himself as Robert. She instantly becomes down bad for the so-called Robert. Meanwhile, Lloyd thinks of how he used double incantations to mix his ugly face with Albert's face to create a new form that doesn't exist. The girl introduces herself as Tao and mentions that she is a B-ranked adventurer and a martial artist. Furthermore, she remembers training in the dojo for 18 years and deciding to get herself a sugar daddy. But no one was interested in a brutal girl like her. This is a perfect opportunity, and she decides to make Robert her boyfriend no matter what. Lloyd then suggests clearing a dungeon together, and desperate Shotty instantly agrees. She beats a bunch of monsters to impress Lloyd, but he is too busy collecting the gems to notice anything. He then asks Tao if she is adventuring on her own, and Tao replies that she hasn't found a 6-foot man to accompany her. While getting his sausage ready for her, Lloyd asks her about Kai, which surprises Tao as not many people are aware of it. According to her, Kai training begins and ends with breathing. They use breathing to circulate Kai, giving them powers beyond normies. She offers to teach him as well and notices Lloyd breathing heavily. Turns out he was trying Kai breathing on his own, and Tao advises him not to do it without any practice, as it can make his lungs feel like they are on fire. Eventually, she offers to teach him one more time and asks him to keep up the breathing until they leave the dungeon. Elsewhere, Lloyd is enjoying a cake when Silpha appears out of nowhere. On the other hand, Tao manages to defeat all the monsters and they reach the final treasure. Tao notices that Lloyd is getting used to Kai breathing, wondering if she has bagged the perfect man. Just when they are about to open the chest, a slash comes at them from below along with a skeleton-looking freak. She advises Lloyd to take his weak ass outside as her fight with the skeleton might break his calcium-deficient bones. With that being said, the battle between Tao and the skeleton begins, and she decides to buy enough time for Robert to escape. Meanwhile, Lloyd is flying across the cave due to the force Tao pushed him with, and he deploys his shield and ends up crushing some midget goblins in order to stop. He wonders if it is a good idea to return back and asks Grimoire, who seems to be shitting his pants, and asks Lloyd to come home. Elsewhere, the battle continues and Tao has already lost more blood than she does during that time of the month. The skeleton recognizes Tao's Kai technique and mentions that he ate someone with a similar ability once. He further mentions that a flat-chested girl like her is not worth eating and praises Lloyd for reacting to his attack instantly. Tao replies that both he and Lloyd are desperate for knowledge, but she has a feeling that Lloyd might find something interesting, while most of the skeletons can find dirty panties. Following that, Tao begins attacking it again, and the skeleton deploys a shield. Tao keeps on attacking it again and again, eventually managing to break through, but her body gives up afterward. However, the skeleton is still unharmed and powers up his attack to take the virgin's life. Luckily, Lloyd appears just in time and defends her against the attack. Tao notices the seriousness on Lloyd's face as he lunges toward the skeleton and appears behind it using the Kai technique. While defending himself from the skeleton's attacks, Lloyd thinks of a way to merge mana with Kai and begins to focus. Forgetting all the clapping techniques he decided to perform with Tao. Lloyd then begins taking in as much air as he can and removes the barrier, as his speed alone is enough to defend himself against the skeleton's attacks. Following that, he creates an offensive ability by combining mana and Kai, but is too weak to reach him. He gives it another try and keeps on improving the quality, enjoying the battle more and more. The skeleton begins to freak out as Lloyd's attacks start reaching him. Eventually, Lloyd hits him with an attack that slices through the skeleton, slicing him in half. After the battle, they check the treasure, which turns out to be a rugged knife. Tao decides to let Lloyd have some action at night as a reward. Suddenly, the treasure chest begins drowning, and the cave-in process begins. Luckily, Lloyd manages to dig out the chest, and they leave the dungeon before it closes. Afterward, Tao realizes that Lloyd is a pretty powerful mage and wonders if he used Kai techniques to mock the incompetent fool she is. Before Lloyd leaves, Tao informs him that his last attack was called Kai Blade and promises to train even harder so she can use it as well. She also promises to eat a lot so she can grow her jugs to Lloyd's liking. After returning home, he witnesses Grimoire in a dire state, and he mentions that Silpha chased him around and continuously beat his ass for becoming so weak. Later, Grimoire mocks Lloyd for coming home with a shabby-looking knife. Lloyd then dips the knife in water and scrapes the surface, which separates the mana essence from its surface. Apparently, it is a catalyst that can even strengthen a butter knife from the dollar store. He then puts all the mana essence in a glass container and mixes it with water, commenting on how it is hard to come by and enchantments are difficult to do. Because of that, Lloyd decides to analyze the mana essence and then create some himself. Lloyd uses a spell that separates all the ingredients, making him aware of all the ingredients used. He already has a core, and all there is left is to gather oil and silver. Following that, he robs his old geezer of some silver, and Grimoire melts it. After that, his sword training with Silpha begins, and even though he uses some cheap tricks, she manages to win. She then gives him some massage oil that Silpha uses on her clients as a gift because she is proud of him for overcoming his bad performance in a day. Silpha then starts to think about how Lloyd can become the Knight Commander and get a bunch of baddies when he grows up. After adding oil to the silver, he requests a supply of weapons from Albert. This results in the knights being forced to give away the swords they bought by saving money instead of replacing their ripped underwear. With everything ready, Lloyd starts writing the first enchantment on the sword and writes a whole essay, which ends up breaking it. Nonetheless, he keeps on writing on more swords and eventually comes out with 50 good ones. Robert takes a look at the sword and can't believe how good it looks, making him wonder if Lloyd is even more of a geek than he thought. The knights start mocking Lloyd's abilities while Silpha controls her anger. Lloyd asks Robert to test one of the swords, and he agrees, so they decide to bully some monsters. Lloyd, accompanied by his brother Prince Albert and Silpha, leaves the capital to go on the hunt. Inside the forest, Lloyd asks Silpha where the monster is, and Silpha replies that it is by the lake. Albert teases Silpha about how she won't let Lloyd out of her sight and suggests that perhaps she has other special feelings for him. Silpha then unsheathes her sword, startling Albert, who immediately shrinks like a plant without water and adds that he is just joking. However, Silpha announces that they are under attack. A group of lame-looking monsters called kobolds with steel weapons attack their group, and one of the soldiers shouts that they protect Albert, totally ignoring the existence of Lloyd, who is also there. Lloyd jokes that he is scared even though he has already sensed the kobolds with the spectral detection technique Tao has taught him. The soldiers realize that the enchanted swords are cutting the monsters down as if they were flimsy sheets of cardboard. Albert announces to everyone that Lloyd is a talented enchanter, and Silpha, who has made a castle of unalived kobolds, stands on them and agrees with him. One of the kobolds remaining decides to attack Lloyd and his brother Albert. But surprisingly, Tao jumps in out of nowhere with her thunderous thighs and kicks the kobold away right on the jaw before announcing herself. Lloyd, like a confused scatterbrain, carelessly calls out her name and almost gives away that he is Robert, the adventurer she met earlier. Tao comes closer and analyzes his face, noting that he actually looks like Robert. But before she can link any clues like Sherlock Holmes, Silpha cuts down another kobold with a death wish that attacks Tao from behind. Silpha thanks Tao for her assistance, but tells her not to be so free with Lloyd. In true tsundere fashion, they both have a clash of stares until they are separated by Albert, who invites Tao to come along with them. At night, they are all camped by the lake, and Albert thanks Tao for her help and tells her that he is a prince. Tao shamelessly thinks of how hot he is, showing her desperation, but says that she doesn't think he's the one she sensed. She looks around, searching for Lloyd, but doesn't see him anywhere. Lloyd, who is avoiding Tao so she doesn't recognize him, enters his tent only for 2 massive grenades to explode in his face. Silpha then suffocates him with her weapons of mass destruction, and mentions that she will be sleeping in his tent. Lloyd attempts to escape, but is quickly overpowered. Just as she pins him down in a horse riding position, Tao walks in, her eyes bulging because of the scene before her. Silpha throws a dagger at Tao and walks out of the tent to meet her, and they begin to argue. The soldiers, who are very much interested in the hot steaming quarrel between two tsundirs, all blush at the sight of the melons and thighs. Lloyd walks away feeling stressed and goes to sit with Albert, who advises him to be careful with women. Tao and Silpha realize the soldiers are watching them and knock them out. Tao mentions that she only stopped by because she was around the area on a mission to a collapsed shrine. Silpha tells her that she should get going, but Albert advises that it's too dangerous for one person to go alone, and that Tao should stay with them because of her useful ability to detect danger around. Lloyd senses the monster in the forest seconds before Tao does as it attacks the soldiers. Lloyd goes to sit by Silpha as she instructs him to stay behind her. Lloyd watches the action like the nerd he is, analyzing how the monster can move so quickly despite being big. The soldiers and Tao attack the monster until Albert uses a fire spell that everyone just seems to love. The spell is amplified by the enchanted sword and burns the monster to crisps. They all applaud him, but he gives the credit to Lloyd, saying it was because of his enchanted swords. Grim is worried and looks towards the shrine, saying that he remembers there was a demon sealed there. As if on cue, the burnt wolf monster stands up, and other monsters appear beside it. The monster opens its mouth, revealing the head of the ugliest demon to have ever existed, Pazuzu. The demon laughs at them and calls them puny mortals before unleashing the horde of monsters that somehow look cute and ugly at the same time. The monsters, this time, regenerate from damage quickly. Grim explains to Lloyd that the demon Pazuzu is controlling the other monsters with a type of magic that also allows him to feed them mana and regenerate from attacks. As in typical Lloyd's manner, he asks Grim to teach him the spell despite everyone else fighting for their dear precious lives. The demon Pazuzu insults both Silpha and Lloyd, thinking that they are all useless mortals. Silpha approaches him with a display of sword tricks and gives him the roasting of his life, telling him to stop talking because his breath stinks so bad and it'll make her nose fall off. Pazuzu is enraged and attacks her in a blitz, but she actually dodges and cuts off all his legs, surprising everyone. Pazuzu focuses his mana on regenerating the body of the monster he's inside, which gives the others a chance to defeat the other monsters. Albert tells Silpha to keep attacking Pazuzu so he can't spread his mana. Meanwhile, Lloyd is learning how to use string magic without a care in the world. Grim explains to him that Pazuzu probably has a knack for it, which is why he is good at controlling the monsters. Pazuzu tries the standard villain technique of threatening the hero's loved one by saying he will shred Lloyd to bits and cut out his innards. This statement proves to be a grave mistake on his part. He manages to swallow Silpha, but it doesn't do any damage. Instead, now that she's inside his mouth, she cuts him open from the inside and unleashes a barrage of special and very flashed attacks that look like she's playing Fruit Ninja. She manages to separate Pazuzu from the mouths of the monsters he is hiding in and gives him the beating of his poor demon life. As Pazuzu hunches on his knees in utter defeat and humiliation, Silpha tells him that the only thing he is fit to feel is her master blade. Pazuzu, who looks like he's been hitting the gym for centuries as compensation for being ugly, unleashes his miasma as he won't be easily defeated. He heals all the wounds from Silpha, and it looks like he just got serious about them. The miasma wears down Silpha, our Chris Tyson from Wish, who can't wait to carry Lloyd's babies. At this point, she is exhausted from the battle, leaving almost none of her clothes intact. Tao is the only one standing against Pazuzu, who tries to capture her and succeeds in getting her swallowed by one of the bearwolves, but not before she senses the presence of Robert, her burning crush, who still happens to be our nerdy magic genius Lloyd, the young star prince who is waltzing around the miasma with Grim without much concern, asks Pazuzu questions about the miasma. Since he isn't just plagued with his terrifying looks, but also a low IQ, it took him a minute to notice that Lloyd was completely unfazed by his miasma. After answering the questions, he finally notices that Grim is a demon, and like a dumb demon, he chooses to taunt him for serving Lloyd. He was surprised that demons could be cute too. Having lived close to the river, even his reflection took a look and rejected their appearance. Lloyd is surprised by how weak Pazuzu is, and even as the demon launches the monsters at him, Lloyd easily copies the string magic and is able to snatch control of them from Pazuzu, immediately telling the monsters to spit out Tao. With their affected pride as predators, they all attack Pazuzu in order to take revenge for having been under his control and having their parents eliminated by him. After a series of attacks, Pazuzu squints his face, making it even more ugly, before stomping the bear wolves in frustration. He releases his aura as if to make a statement that they could never beat him, as he's an ancient demon who has lived for a century. But just then, Lloyd also releases his aura, which easily swallows up Pazuzu's aura as well as his dreams. Pazuzu instantly discovers that he is in trouble, as Lloyd didn't even see him as an opponent. To him, the ugly demon is just a weakling perfect for a lab rat, but not much of a warm-up. He immediately decides to run, but not before showing everyone the absolute peak of his ugliness. Lloyd begins his attacks, and Pazuzu soon begins to praise himself for being able to dodge Lloyd's attacks, which is pretty impressive until he gets caught. Lloyd cooks up a really crazy spell to test Pazuzu's vitality, as demons cannot meet their demise from magic. Pazuzu shakes in his boots, sensing the spell, and now he has gone through the first hurdle of world domination, begging for his doomed life. Lloyd wishes to keep the attack going for 30 minutes, but Pazuzu, the great demon, seems to be a 2-minute guy. Lloyd is surprised because he thought Pazuzu could take more of the spell. The demon actually does something impressive by breaking the barriers and records. He lets out the pain of his failed ambition as he slowly turns into nothing. Grim swallows his remnant mana, promising to take on his ambition. Everyone soon recovers from the fight and slowly gets up. Praising Lloyd, he pins the victory on Robert before venturing back to their kingdom with a huge fan club for Prince Albert. In the kingdom, they appear before the king and recount the situation. Then Albert suggests that Lloyd be allowed to join the royal succession, and Lloyd goes all dark in his rejection with a straight-up no. He figured being king would cut into his magic practice time. Besides, why rule the kingdom when he was out ruling the laws of reality? Lloyd plays around with Shiro, one of the bear wolves who decided to follow him. Silpha shows up, and they chat about magic and other things while his father and brother watch from above with great expectations for his future. Teaching him tricks and commands, he can't get Shiro to learn complicated commands. Just then, Silpha suggests that he goes to his sister, Princess Alice, who is a prodigy in communicating with animals of all kinds. Lloyd agrees, as it's a great idea, and they head to her tower. Upon sighting her baby brother, she pounces on him as they exchange greetings, and she gives him a kiss.
Oh! Dude! What the fuck?
Which gives Silpha a slight heartache as she can't bear the scene unfolding before her eyes. Swiftly, she snatches Lloyd away from his sister. She'd been ready to fight off any girl who got too close, but she didn't see that sneak attack coming. Alice is scolded by her maid, and she mentions how cute her baby brother is, admitting that she couldn't help herself. Before Lloyd could ask about Shiro, his sister already knew what he wanted. He proceeds to ask about how she communicates with her animals. She gives him a vague description about it being love and advises Lloyd not to overcomplicate things with different explanations. After observing her for a little while, Lloyd understands how she is able to communicate with them and, as such, is able to give complicated commands to his bear wolf after only his first try. Excited, Alice pounces on him again and celebrates, but Lloyd escapes from her grasp. After they leave, Silpha wants him to train immediately, but Lloyd doesn't. Then, Albert comes to his rescue and claims he wants to talk to his brother about something. Silpha protests, feeling everyone is getting ahead of her at spending time with Lloyd, but she can't disobey Albert in the end. Albert tells him he wants him to meet someone, and the person is the fourth prince, Diane. They visit Diane's blacksmith workshop, which is situated in the middle of a small pond. Diane says he wants to talk to Lloyd about the sword enchantments he did for Albert and his knights, as he doesn't believe a kid could do that. Lloyd is nervous, and Albert tells him it's been Diane's dream to make enchanted swords since he was 10. Lloyd makes an enchanted sword that shocks Diane, who is so blown away by the sword's magic that he literally drops his jaw. Diane asks him to help him make the perfect enchanted swords, which can only be made when the enchanter and the blacksmith work in perfect unison. Lloyd is excited about the process and wants to join in. Soon, they start, but the swords keep breaking and not holding the enchantment. Grim, surprised to see his master have so much trouble with magic, notices that the mana essence is not the right quality. Just as Lloyd is thinking of sneaking into a dungeon to get pure mana essence, Silpha openly suggests it. Although frantically acting like he is not a person made for dungeons, he must have wanted to see if he could level up his acting skills before leveling up his loot. He accepts and goes to the Adventurers Guild to start his journey and register as an adventurer. While filling out the form, a crystal ball is given to him so he can measure his abilities for his ranking, compressing his mana down so as not to cause too much attention to himself, as his relaxed mode has a tendency to break a few small countries. After suppressing his power and touching the crystal ball, he is graded as E rank, and the attendant notices his potential due to his excellent magic power and calls him the most promising adventurer since the Silver Blader, who also happens to be our hot maid Silpha. There is an outrage at the guild as the crowd could help sneer at how she could compare this weakling, Lloyd, to the Silver Blader. She then wants to re-register in order to allow them access to good quests. But she discovers she has to start 2 ranks below, making her C rank because she has been away from the guild for so long. But just then, Tao shows up and offers to help them accept a list quests. But not before she and Silpha have their usual spat, with Silpha trying to keep her beloved Lloyd away from her. Silpha tells Lloyd about her time as an adventurer, and how she failed to bring down the Assassin's Guild. After the conversation, they then explore random dungeons. Back at the palace, Albert motivates his brother Diane and tells him he wants him to have a relationship with Lloyd, and that is why he brings them both together. Diane, moved by his brother's pure heart, is set to make amazing spellbound swords to support his brother in case a war is brewing to help his Albert win. Lloyd returns from the dungeons, and he and Diane make a series of spellbound swords which completely shock Diane and Albert at how efficient and powerful the swords are. When they see its power, they have to check if their eyes are enchanted to see something so epic. After a long day with his siblings and adventuring, Lloyd settles in bed, playing with Grim and Shiro, before noticing that an intruder has invaded the palace. He immediately takes action to say hello, enclosing himself and the intruder in a barrier. He finds out it's a cute little girl who immediately wants to PK him using her poison magic. He tries to counter by healing himself, but she informs him that it's useless as her toxins are unbeatable. Lloyd uses a purification spell with a casual, challenge-accepted manner. She escapes, feeling like she had the victory, while Lloyd, being the magic sociopath he always is, gets excited at having discovered a new magic variation he wants to study. Right after she leaves, he heals himself, and Grim shows up with a change of clothes. Grim asks why he let her go, and Lloyd explains that it's so he can follow her to her hideout since it's more fun to hunt her down like a high-stakes game of hide and seek. He recounts to Grim where he recognizes her from, the posters he saw at the Adventurers Guild, which Silpha had talked about. He's excited to study the members of the Assassin's Guild. As he and Grim exit the palace, Silpha rushes out to chase after him like the man of her dreams, except that this man is a child. At the hideout of the assassins, the poison-blighted Wren gives an account of her visit to the palace and what she discovered. One of the members criticizes her for not being able to get the job done properly and tells her to stop putting out fillers and trying to act like their leader. They soon discover they're being watched. Lloyd, who is disguised, appears to them and shocks Wren, who thinks her poison is that deadly it would take a while for him to recover, only to find out Lloyd just shrugged it off like a bad cold. They get into a fight like Introduction, throwing fists, the only way they can think of explaining their powers and names. One after the other, they begin different attacks and soon realize that the 7th prince, Lloyd, is a magic sociopath. While they're plotting their next move, Lloyd is busy experimenting with new spells, laughing while bleeding from the mouth, turning their fight into a front row seat for the most chaotic magic class ever. He soon discovers that none of the members of the Assassin's Guild can control their abilities and regard them as curses, which is why they're forced to live their lives as assassins, doing jobs no one else wants. He fine-tunes Galilea's body as he attacks and imprints a spell on it. Before he can catch a breather, Wren attacks, trying to avenge her friend, whom she thought he unalived. Not 2 seconds later, Galilea gets up in tears. Galilea realizes that he is fine and can now control his curse. Lloyd points to the rest of the assassins, inviting them to come and get their fix. He tells them he hasn't lifted their curse, but only made a spell that allows them to control their abilities. After fixing them all, the battle is put behind them as they get food and drinks, and Lloyd, who obviously took lessons from Silpha and Tao, has managed to lose all his clothes in the fight. While Babylon and Galilea tease Ren about being able to wear dresses now that her poison isn't leaking out, she can wear clothes without worrying that her wardrobe will turn into a toxic fashion statement. She protests and denies her joy, instead talking about the oddities of Lloyd, who has just helped them. Grimm jumps to his master's defense, saying that Lloyd plays with arcane forces for fun. He explains that fighting demons and making spellbound swords is the idea of a good time for the young prince. Lloyd, excited to continue the sparring match to see more fun magic, is disappointed when the assassins refuse. Instead, he wishes to talk as they have a lot they wish him to know. This greatly disappoints the prince, who, with every sentence that Galilea speaks, looks like he's being deflated, right until he hears the name of the leader, Jade, the shadow wolf phantom who is blighted with a teleportation ability. Hearing about new magic that he hasn't experienced, Lloyd gets excited again for the conversation about Jade. However, the explanation has little information on the ability of the leader, which takes Lloyd back to his deflated state. Soon, the conversation ends, and as they're about to dig into their meal, they receive a letter teleported to them from the leader. The letter informs them that he is still alive and well, which relieves them, and they all celebrate like little brats. The assassins apologize to Lloyd, saying that they want to go and meet their leader, but they promise to pay him back sometime. Ren, who is still dressed like a lowly stripper, sheepishly asks Lloyd to join them, but he firmly declines her. He then points out that their precious leader, Jade, sent that letter to their precise location, which means he has probably learned how to use his powers. The different members begin to suspect that Jade might have lied to them. Ren pathetically weeps from heartbreak, and she reassures the others that Jade has probably just learned how to use his powers. Lloyd tells them that whatever happens, he'll take care of him like their daddy, and that they should just follow him. The others are relieved and start meat riding him because of his awesomeness. Lloyd transports them to their leader Jade with his insanely convenient magic. Silpha arrives at the scene to find a note that Lloyd has left, stating that he went to the neighboring kingdom with the Assassin's Guild. The overprotective nanny and Prince Albert, who adores his little brother, leave their diplomatic sides behind and declare war on Lordost. Albert figures that if assassins are involved, the only way to ensure his siblings' safety is to turn his reaction dial up to total war. Meanwhile, the pathetic fools don't even last up to 10 minutes and have to rest somewhere in the woods. Ren runs off into the woods and says she will find something for them to eat. In the past, her poison ended her parents' lives when she was a child, and she had to grow up alone in the forest until Jade found her and took her to the others as a new team member. Then, Lloyd caresses the robe that Jade made for Ren as if he's caressing a long-lost lover and says he would like to meet Jade. Grimm comments that Jade must be an incredible person for Lloyd to take an interest in him. Ren prepares a meal for them that looks identical to a witch's cooking pot. The guild members are terrified to consume such disgusting-looking food, only to find Grimm and Lloyd downing the food like some lost puppies. Seeing that a royal like Lloyd is eating such disgusting-looking food, they all try it and realize it's actually not so bad, even going ahead to ask for seconds. They continue on towards the Lordost castle, and Lloyd falls asleep like a lazy shut-in while he is carried. Grimm counters when they say he looks cute while sleeping and explains that he has a heavy-duty barrier protecting his royal ass at all times. The guild members, grateful for his assistance thus far, decide to scout Lordost Castle like a bunch of foolhardy ninjas without him to ensure it is safe before bringing him along. Grimm accompanies them and, in an astounding act of wisdom, insists that Lloyd is safe alone, but the guild members might not be. He also reasons that Lloyd would be furious if anything happened to them. Upon their arrival at the castle, the guild members are welcomed with a celebration by a bunch of fanatic-looking creeps. Jade comes along dressed like the Joker from 1925 and greets them warmly. They settle into the festivities, relieved to see Jade seemingly safe. However, when they begin questioning Jade about his suspicious new mastery of his formerly useless ability and his prolonged absence, like a father going to buy milk, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The castle's inhabitants and Jade all lose their cheerful demeanor and smile like a collection of possessed Chucky dolls. Jade uses magic to force the guild members to kneel, revealing that he doesn't give a rat's ass about them. Strange dark entities that sever their bodies, like Prime Shakira, also come out of the inhabitants' bodies around them. Using his knockoff spidey senses, Grimm notices something is wrong and attacks Jade. Jade easily kicks him away from the castle in a way Ronaldo would be proud of, and Grim lands near Lloyd, who has just woken up from his lazy-ass slumber. Inside the castle, the demon lord masquerading as Jade reveals his true, sinister nature. He rains grade SS insults on the guild members, disclosing that everyone around them at the castle is a demon he brought from the netherworld. The entity, now known as Lord Gisarm, explains to them, like daycare children, that he has been trying to possess Jade due to his powerful teleportation ability and eventually succeeded after wearing down Jade's mind. The guild members are devastated by the loss of their leader and friend, as they all produce enough tears to fill the River Nile. The demons express their eagerness to possess the guild members. When Ren angrily protests, Gisarm, who seems to love soccer, cruelly kicks her away, destroying a hairpin gifted by the original Jade. As he picks her up like an abandoned toy, he notices the magical tattoos on their bodies, courtesy of Lloyd, which help them control their powers. Annoyed, he demands to know who tampered with his prized property and uses magic to force Ren to reveal the information. Ren resists by biting her tongue as Gisarm continues his interrogation. Suddenly, a large amount of mana surrounds the assassins and shields them, and a massive energy beam suddenly blasts down, creating a huge crater while exterminating the low-level demons in the area like germs. The assassins are shocked to have survived that, and they see Lloyd with a serious expression, looking down like a real boss. He then descends and comforts Ren by healing her injuries and tells the Blighted Assassins Guild to flee. The remaining demons in the area are horrified by the huge crater left by the Lloyd's blast, and wonder if their lord is still alive. Gisarm suddenly appears at the back of the group and kicks one of them inside the crater filled with lava. He then gives a cold look at them and orders them to go after the assassins. This time, Lloyd is up against Gisarm, a guy who looks like he eats chaos for breakfast and washes it down with a gallon of pure evil. The kind of villain who sends shivers down everyone's spine, except Lloyd, of course. For Lloyd, Gisarm is just another challenge to perfect his magic on with a playful twist. After witnessing Lloyd's creative approach to magic, Grim is starting to rethink his life choices. He's the voice of reason in Lloyd's world of magical mayhem. As Lloyd gears up for his grand entrance against Gisarm, Grim is already mentally drafting his resignation letter. Gisarm, with all his dark and brooding energy, doesn't even faze Lloyd. In fact, Lloyd shows up to the fight like he's about to start a new anime spells blazing, and a smirk that screams, "I'm about to ruin this guy's whole career." The fight itself is less of a battle and more of a magical circus. Gisarm pulls out all the Stop's dark magic, menacing speeches, the whole villain starter pack, but Lloyd, ever the overachiever, is busy multitasking. He's taking down Gisarm's attacks while probably mentally noting which spells he needs to perfect later, like a pro gamer casually easing through a level while eating a sandwich. The intense battle is such a sight that even the low-level demons and the Blighted Assassins all stop in their tracks to watch the two fight. Right as both sides come back to their senses, the Blighted return to trying to escape, and the low-level demons return to trying to capture them. Gisarm notices that despite all his awesome attacks, he hasn't managed to pressure Lloyd once, and he is completely unhurt. Our young prince isn't much surprised by this outcome. He is secretly analyzing ways to counter Gisarm's attacks. The two enter another spirited conversation about magic power and mana control, temporarily ceasing the battle while enjoying the conversation, giving each other a fun, learnable moment even before their goal of eliminating each other. After the short conversation, the battle continues with Gisarm, once again, taking the first strike and looking like he has caught Lloyd in his strike as multiple attacks pierce through the young prince. The Blighted Assassin Guild, who now has the ability to control their powers, throws an attack against the demons to aid their smooth escape, but soon realizes that it will be impossible to escape without the demons catching up quickly. The classic sacrifice one person for the greater good scene comes up, and Galilea and Talia are ready to die for the safety of their teammates. The fight goes back to Lloyd, who uses a substitute to escape Gisarm's attack. His magic pursuit has led him to learn the art of ninjutsu, of which Naruto would be proud. Without a doubt that he could be defeated, he draws one of his enchanted swords to aid him in his battle. As Gisarm gets excited about finding a worthy opponent, Lloyd asks if they can move the fight somewhere else as he notices the arrival of the overprotective. Silpha is still following Lloyd around like a fangirl, ready to fend off any competition with her strength. Meanwhile, the rest of Lloyd's crew is starting to realize that being around him is like living in a perpetual storm. Exciting, unpredictable, and potentially life-threatening adventure. Albert and Silpha start interrogating the Assassin's Guild and trying to squeeze them like dry lemons about Lloyd's whereabouts and actions. The guild members are terrified and whimper like criminals in Gotham, as they are reluctant to reveal Lloyd's power because of a promise Lloyd asked them to make earlier. He instructed them to keep his strength secret from any of the royal douchebags. Ren explains that the demons are the true villains who kidnapped Jade, their leader, while Lloyd is actually assisting them. Silpha doesn't believe her and threatens to chop off her head. Prince Albert interrupts her, and the guild members think he's going to believe them. They proceed to praise him like a team of the ugliest cheerleaders. However, Albert simply says they should start chopping heads from the adults, as he doesn't want to start with kids, adding that they should shut their disgusting mouths as he glares at them the way he would look at cow dung. As Ren starts to cry, she begs Prince Albert and Silpha, with Oscar-worthy tears, to believe them. Alice manages to convince Albert and Silpha to believe the guild's story, saying her pet didn't sense any ill intent from them, so they press on to find Lloyd. However, their progress is halted when the bridge collapses due to an aerial attack by Gisarm. Gisarm asks Lloyd if he's okay with fighting alone before trying to spam his spear attack again. Lloyd dodges and holds his sword like he has some grand plan cooked up in his pot of mysteries. This makes Grim wonder what Lloyd is up to with the sword. Because of the broken bridge, the troops have to retreat so that the demons, who have fallen and are now swimming with the skill of Michael Phelps, wouldn't get around and surround them. Prince Albert's sword troops start throwing weak fireballs at the demons, but they don't do much damage. Still, the sword troops start losing mana quickly, and soon look like men who have just gone 12 rounds with their wives. They struggle against the demons, who quickly regenerate. Albert, who worries about the people like some divine saint, initially hesitates to eliminate them because the people are inhabited, but after Babylon explains, after snapping one of their ugly necks like a twig, that the people are only shells now, he and the soldiers attack the demons without a shred of mercy. Albert uses a massive spell that rains fire on the demons, leaving him weak too. On the bridge, Silpha attempts to cross the broken bridge like a suicidal fool, but fails and is attacked by a much stronger 8th class demon. The demon starts spitting disses at Silpha and calls her an insect, but Silpha claps back and tells him that his hat looks like a turd. The demon, enraged, attacks her. During their intense battle, Silpha and the demon start copying each other's attacks like a third-rate Kakashi, but they are unable to best one another for a while, and the demon brags about being able to copy Silpha's sword technique because the body he possesses must have worked hard in swordsmanship. Silpha calls for the dog, who has now climbed back up and retrieves a sword hidden in the giant dog's thick fur. Another flashback shows Silpha lamenting, like a self-proclaimed goddess, her inability to use her full strength without breaking swords. Lloyd, accompanied by Diane, jogs towards her like a happy puppy and then presents her with an enhanced sword, which she calls Demonbane. The sword is made to be stronger and more flexible because he guesses that Silpha is holding back. Silpha then gives him a legendary hug that lets Lloyd feel the full texture of her melons. In the present, the demon goes into roasting mode and insults the Assassin's Guild members about Jade. Silpha responds by slicing the demon, using the One Punch Man style in one strike with her technique, House of Langley's leading tiger bite. In a flashback, Jade silently sat down before a statue in a church and exclaimed that he had finally done it. However, as he was having his moment of nothing-alike peace, Gisarm appeared and asked Jade if he had made peace with his death. In response, Jade replied that he would not let Gisarm get away with what he had done, and that he would lose no matter what. Gisarm became curious about what Jade had just said, and when he tried to ask who would defeat him, Jade silently died. Suddenly, Gisarm saw the chance and took over his body to become the Jade everyone knows with long black hair. Gisarm wondered what Jade was trying to do before he passed away. Through his body, he could use his powers and see his memories and friends. However, there was something deep within his soul that he could not witness. It didn't matter for now, and the just-sliced, underpaid lackey congratulated him for taking over Jade's powers. When he asked Gisarm what to do next, he revealed that Jade was afraid of wars, so he would tickle his soul even in death and start a great one. Back at the broken bridge, Silpha moves toward a fallen swordsman whose body was taken over by a demon lying in blood. Silpha sits down and praises the swordsman for his unique style, and Ren starts crying. So, Silpha calls everyone for being unfit as assassins, and suddenly, the river evaporates with hot steam, blinding everyone. While everyone wonders what happened, Ren notices Lloyd flying in a shield and Gisarm in Jade's body following him. Gisarm rushes behind Lloyd to slay him with his mana spears, something powerful enough to pierce through Lloyd's unbreakable layered barrier, but he manages to change it with a new one every time. However, the last mana spear penetrates through his shield and initiates a cursed speech, but the overpowered main character does it again, and he leaves his shield to just fly away. While Gisarm tries to attack Lloyd with his other abilities, Lloyd tries to figure out his next major move, which would be going with an all-out attack if Lloyd was in his place. So, he finds it super annoying and starts to attack instead of running, casting Infernum Amorcier. A giant fire figure appears, and as it tries to attack Jade with an all-flame punch, he teleports because the Drip Lord loves his clothes more than his life. Lloyd figures out that he dodged his attack, and now he tries to learn from where Gisarm actually learned his location. Suddenly, seeing all the water vapor in the air, Lloyd uses it to his advantage, and when he gets the chance, he rushes to stab Gisarm with his dirt clones. While everyone has stabbed him, Gisarm thinks he has caught the real Lloyd and pierces him with mana spears. However, in a jaw-dropping situation, it is another clone with his real sword, and Lloyd appears behind him to cast flame on him, putting his Drip Lord reign to an end. Now, hundreds of Lloyd clones surround Gisarm. Since this is an alarming situation, Gisarm tries to do things the easiest way. Use a barrage of mana spears everywhere. He tries his best to catch the real Lloyd multiple times, but eventually fails until the real Lloyd silently rushes in to stab him while dodging all of his spears. Lloyd remembers a conversation with Grimoire when he explained about his sword spell, called Spelltake. With this spell, if the sword hits another spell, the user can either use it to increase their mana or analyze it to learn it. So, as Lloyd gets near Jade, using the Obscure to hide himself, he hits Shadow Wolf magic to analyze it. Grimoire screams at Lloyd to stop learning Shadow Wolf because Jade has spent his whole life learning the spell and yet has failed. Sounds like a skill issue. Lloyd suddenly enters a whole dimension of Shadow Wolf where he tries to look for Jade, but instead, he sees big mana balls, and through telepathy, he learns about the magic's truth. Back in the real world, all of the dirt clones fall, and Lloyd finally reveals himself to Gisarm. Gisarm taunts him and offers him to join his team so they can take over the world together. However, Lloyd taunts his weakness and tells him how humans are powerful since they have the power to dream and have no limits. Gisarm takes no interest in his yapping, and as soon as he tries to exterminate Lloyd, Lloyd punches his life out of him instead. While Gisarm groans from the pain, Lloyd reveals that this wasn't even a mana punch, but rather it contained a Kai charge. So, he continues to taunt Gisarm and tells him to hurry up, which makes him angrier. As he gets up, Lloyd asks him if he remembers what Jade told him before passing, and Gisarm gets a flashback of Jade's words, "You will lose." Mr. Cool loses his cool, and when he tries to attack Lloyd again, Lloyd beats him to a pulp, combining all of his techniques for a long time. For Gisarm, the damage he receives is not the problem, but the pain his attacks cause. Gisarm tries to dodge and run away, but all of his attempts are futile, and Lloyd brings him to borderline death. In the end, when Lloyd almost pushes Gisarm into magma, he manages to run away, but Lloyd kicks him super hard and releases his aura. While they are in the air, Lloyd remembers the time when he used to learn magic and how it made him bricked. He could imagine the people who created those magics with him, making him fall in love with dreams. Now, Lloyd tells Gisarm that if he's out of ideas, he must die. However, Gisarm has one last straw. He reveals that the Demon Lord can control all of the mana in the atmosphere, and he accumulates all of the mana in the air to manifest a large dark magic ball, Mortal Dark Sphere, which can destroy everything in its radius. He throws the blast at Lloyd, which vanishes even before reaching him. Jade starts losing his mind, yelling about where his blast went. Lloyd explains that he erased it by using a similar technique. He reveals that he can also use a similar spell called Void. He further states that he is quite experienced in using this power. Jade starts yapping and ranting about how he is more powerful than any human. His uncontrollable yapping stops after Lloyd wildly sneezes, which makes him even more mad and prompts him to attack. He touches Lloyd's head and freezes because now he's feeling and seeing Lloyd's true power. This power makes him start to sweat. Lloyd asks him if hitting him with Void would slay him. Jade tries to escape, but Lloyd hits him with a Void. Albert and Diane are fighting demons alongside Luru, Shiro, and Silpha somewhere else. Ren helps them with her poison, but warns them that she doesn't have perfect control over her power. Albert feels that something is off, which is that the sun is not rising despite it being almost daytime. Back to Jade and Lloyd. A huge void made by Lloyd is eating Jade. He tries to flee by escaping Jade's body, but he is unable to do it. He pulls up another trick of acting like Jade is back in his senses. He starts to beg him to stop the attack, but he doesn't. He starts to call literally everyone: Galilea, Crow, Talia, Babylon, and Ren. After Lloyd recognizes that he is trying to perform a skit to catch him off guard, he slays him instantly without any mercy. After this moment, Lloyd starts to remember Jade. On the other side, the sun finally appears. Ren also begins to remember Jade, who was so excited about Lloyd, looking up to him and hoping he would pull them out of their curses. Remembering all of this makes her cry. Lloyd sets up a memorial grave for Jade, far from the graves of other peasants. He tells Shiro and Grimoire how strong Jade was and how, with an attentive mind, he fought him. He also reveals that, in his last moments, Jade managed to transcribe a complete spell for Shadow Wolf, which is why it wasn't a complete victory for Lloyd. Ren, hiding behind the tree, is listening to all of this and tries to muster the courage to tell Lloyd how grateful she is. But Albert appears, going to talk to him. He asks him about the grave, which makes Lloyd fumble. Albert tells him that he knows the story of Jade, that he was a sorcerer and how a demon was controlling his body. Lloyd understands that his crew must have cooked this story. Diane and his crew arrive too, and they start to listen to the conversation. Albert gives his approval for keeping the grave, starts to praise him, and tells him that he is proud of his brother. He discloses that the Assassin's Guild has been taken into custody, and they are finding Ren to arrest too, because of the people they have slayed. The crew has said they intend to serve Lloyd as compensation for their crimes. If that's not possible, they will pay the price. He asks him for the decision, keeping him in mind if they snitch him and make some blunders, Lloyd will be held responsible. Lloyd takes responsibility for them and is ready to take them under his cover. Albert seems proud of his brother. He says that he loves him and starts being goofy with him. Finally, Tao arrives to save Lloyd, but she's as late as I am to my job. She sees the atmosphere and understands there is no need for her there, so she runs off. Albert, who has to say thanks to her, also starts to run to her. The Assassin's Guild gets freed after the orders. Albert invites everyone, including the guild, to a tea party. He serves wine instead of tea to the guild, assuming they would prefer it. Talia starts hitting on the prince by offering a drink, and he suddenly turns into a zesty simp, but he denies the offer. Upset by this, Talia casts a love spell on him, making him drink wine. After drinking, the prince loses his mind and starts acting foolishly. Meanwhile, Silpha, Alice, and Ren are relaxing in a hot spring elsewhere. Silpha asks Ren to spill the beans and why she followed them here. Ren expresses she wants to work with Lloyd the same way as Silpha, and how she wants to be with him to express her gratitude and turn the boy into a man in a single night. Silpha tells her to explain this to the prince herself, who is standing behind her. He replies with a simple "sure," which makes her go dumb as she wonders why he's in the women's bathhouse. Silpha starts washing his body parts where the sun doesn't shine, which makes Ren more embarrassed. She asks if she has hurt many people and if he is fine with keeping her by his side. He tells her that she's wasting her potential and that if she had used her poison correctly, she would be a pharmacist. After knowing that her poison can save people, She gets tears in her eyes. He orders her to work on her spell. She starts crying, thinking that nobody has ever praised her. Ren then promises Lloyd that she will work on her spells for positive purposes. Thanks for sticking around till the end, you absolute legend. Let us know if you have any anime suggestions in the comments below. Meanwhile, click on the screen to watch some of our other videos. Until next time, stay awesome, stay AniGeek.